Mysteries remain about the burglary, raising suspicions of an inside job. Now, possibly, and there were some rumors, and you can only imagine where these rumors began. Some rumors said that the royal family had sponsored the heist because they were keen to recover gifts made to the Duke. Who do you think came up with that lie? Does that not sound to you? Does that not have the ring of as if Meghan and Harry had come up with a lie for them to say, hey, you know, I think did it? I think it was probably the royal family. Because why would the royal family stoop so low as to steal the jewels back? You know, I mean, that's low for anybody, but I think certainly for these, you know, elite members of the royal family who have carried themselves with a lot of decency thus far in all of it, I don't think that they would stoop so low as to hire some lame little cat burglar who was then going to leave half the jewels out on a golf course. I think we can all put that idea to bed. Hello, how are you? Welcome to my channel and Merry Christmas. I'm not sure if any of you will even have a chance to see this video today because I'm sure you're spending time with your families, but I wanted to make sure that I got a video out because it's time for Trader King. And we have been doing Brittany this week, but we do still want to be consistent with our chapter of Trader King. And this one's not a super long chapter, but it's so good. I do want to kind of get through it though, because if you've been paying attention to my channel on my community tab, we got a new puppy yesterday. He's a little German short-haired pointer. His name is Nash and he's super cute, but the kids are all upstairs. They're playing with him and it's loud and I can hear his little feet running and I can hear their little feet running and everything like that. So my apologies first and foremost. Hopefully the audio is worth using for this video, but I gotta bring you this chapter because it's short, but it's good. So last chapter that we did, we were talking all about those German documents and the finding of them and the scuttle to try to cover up for David and for Wallace. Now, I expressed distaste in the fact that anybody would want to cover any of that up because to me, it seemed like he should have to bear the consequences. And continually in the comments, people are like, well, you know, they had to because they had to protect the royal family. The royal family was German as well. And so if one decides to go off the deep end, would people surmise that everybody else in the family would go off the deep end? And to that I say, the world is not full of idiots. You know, just because one family member decides to be, you know, the black sheep of the family and, you know, stray into worlds unknown, doesn't mean that the rest of the family would do likewise. And I think it's really simplistic, and I think it's kind of undermining the intelligence of the world to just assume that, oh, because one person did the wrong thing, everybody else in the family will do the wrong thing. Don't you have family members who are like, you know, wild and out? But just because the wild and out family member is doing his own thing doesn't mean that you would do that too. So I think it's a bit reductionistic to say, well, the reason they had to cover for David was they had to, you know, cover for themselves. The rest of them knew they weren't doing anything wrong. You could dig. No one's going to find telegrams where you are making secret plans with Hitler. So I don't know. I don't totally buy that. I know it's an easy thing to say. And I know everybody wants to make much of the fact, well, you know, the British royal family is actually, you know, mostly German and they had to change their name and all this. I mean, I think it was kind of lame that they chose their name. But then at the same time, if you're trying to be the royal family of a certain country, I guess it makes sense to try to change your name to make it sound more Anglified than, you know, German if you're trying to establish your reign in this new country. You know, the whole history of the world is the history of different people groups going and populating different places and taking turns being in charge. You know, so I don't really think that it's that big of a deal and it's not really that secretive if, you know, the British royal family was also mostly German. I just don't feel like that is a big bombshell, like everybody wants to act like it is. It's not like you could hide the fact that that's where they originally came from. Anyway, neither here nor there. Let's get into this chapter, which is called Life Without a Purpose. And when I started this chapter, I was like, huh, is this going to be a chapter without a purpose? You know, do I really want to hear about how they're wandering and meandering? Because I feel like we've been talking about that for a while. But it starts out with a banger. Now, they're back in France. And they're staying with the Coopers, Duff Cooper and his wife. Also, Duff Cooper's mistress is hanging around. It's a really wild and wacky world the elites live in, where everybody's just dining with their own mistress, with their wife at the table. I don't really totally get it. But anyway, suffice it to say, all of these elite people are not willing that David and Wallace should come back and hang out with them because they just find the two of them to be utterly boring. Which is interesting because that's not always what we were getting at the beginning. At the beginning, people I mean, there are people who distance themselves from David and Wallace because they felt like David and Wallace were kind of tainted, you know, like, oh, I don't know, we don't want to get in trouble for hanging out with them. But the people who did were like glamorous. Those two are so glamorous. There's, you know, she's witty, he's charming, he can, you know, really hold the attention of the dining room and all this. But now, people don't have a good word to say about these two. And it could just be post-war tiredness. They don't have the energy to put up with the foolishness anymore. But I mean, people cannot even spare a kind word. So it starts out by saying that Susan Mary Patton, a U.S. diplomat's wife and one of Duff Cooper's mistresses, sat next to the Duke at a dinner in Paris and wrote in her diary, "He is pitiful, looks young and undissipated, and the famous charm is still there, but I never saw a man so bored. They're dining here on Saturday, and I couldn't dread it more." Okay, so apparently he'd sat there and recounted his day to her, which she just could not even begin to care about. He said, "I got a plate, and then I went with the Duchess, and I watched her buy a hat, and then on the way home, I had a car drop me and the boys to watch some of the soldiers play football. And when I got home, the Duchess was having a French lesson, so I had no one to talk to. So I got a lot of tin boxes down, which my mother had sent me last week, and I looked through them. They were essays and so on, and I'd written them when I was in France studying French before the Great War. You know, I'm not much of a reading man." Oh my word. It's too terrible for words. Can you even imagine a person, a former king of an empire, sitting there being like, well, I dilly-dallied here, I dilly-dallied there. I came home, my wife's having French lesson, there was no one to talk to. So then I got down these tins my mama sent me, and they were full of essays that I'd written one time when I was studying. And I read that because, I mean, you know, I'm not much of a reading man. So I just sat there and read my own stupid essays. Like, dude, there's not a book in the house. Can you even imagine? So the problem here is he is never going to be able to find anything to do because, you know, of course, for diplomatic purposes, he's off the table. They can't send him anywhere. They can't trust him politically. And he's not a good representative of the country, especially now that they have all these documents from Germany just, you know, waiting to be leaked. And so they really can't set him out somewhere. But the greater problem is that there isn't really any reason why he could not have devoted his time to a non-governmental job or a charity. But he chose not to do so. Independently wealthy and with no dependents beyond his wife, he had greater freedom than most men of his generation. He was just 50, to pursue his own interests. The problem was that he had few interests. As he told Susan Patton, he was not much of a reading man. When Churchill presented him with an inscribed copy of his memoirs, the Duke thanked him and said he'd put it in the bookshelf next to the other volumes. He had no interest in the arts or helping others. Once, oh man, when I read this, I was like, surely he wasn't serious. He goes, once after sitting through a concert organized by Lady Cunard, he asked, "Did that Mozart chap write anything else?" What? Is he for real? I mean, did he think it was cunning and funny to say that because it's so obviously stupid? I mean, is that his sense of humor? His life revolved around golf, gardening, being entertained, discussing his investments, and musing about politics with the similarly minded, generally rich American businessmen who were anti-Semitic and anti-communist. The problem was that the Duke wanted status, not a job, and to be recognized rather than to contribute. "Meghan and Harry, your uncle's calling." I mean, I want status. I want privilege. I don't want to contribute. Please, not that. Not the C word. Contribute? Patton was back into dining with the Windsors in February. Awful evening at the Windsors, she wrote in her diary. The Duchess determined to play word games despite her complete lack of education and the competition of Lady Diana Cooper, who learned history from her mother's milk. And of course, the Duke kept choosing things that the Duchess couldn't guess. So she screams out, but everybody else knew them. And she screams out when they're playing the game, "Your turn, David, but now take somebody that we all know." And the embarrassing thing is everyone did know the other characters that they were guessing. I guess it was some sort of charades or, you know, one of those games where, you know, when you put the name on your forehead and then you've got to guess what you have. And she couldn't do it because she didn't know anything. And of course, David, I mean, if he doesn't read, what could David know? The book goes on. Now we've got more Duff Cooper's feelings about life. And we heard from him in the last chapter. And he just doesn't think much of the Duke. I mean, he's always thought he was kind of pathetic. But now he's really doubling down in this chapter. And his diary entries are scathing. The Duke of Windsor came to see me this morning at his own request, noted Duff Cooper in his diary. I thought he wanted to consult me about something, but not at all. He sat here for nearly an hour, chatting about one thing and another. I expect the truth is that he is at such a loose end that Wallace, to get him out of the house, said, "Why don't you go around to see Duff one morning and have an interesting talk about politics?" Even the Duchess can't stand David, which, I mean, isn't wholly surprising. She didn't really want to marry him, as we know, try to get out of it. But now she's made her bed and must lie in it. The Windsors moved to an apartment at the Ritz, and then they moved back to LaCroix. It had billeted Italians and German troops during the war and was in a sorry state, with curtains and oil paintings stolen, mines in the garden, rusting radar on the roof, and huge pillboxes on the sea wall. But Wallace, never happier than making a new home, set about restoring it and their pre-war life. Within a month, she had a staff of 22 and was entertaining furiously, helped by the fact that as a major general, the Duke was entitled to draw rations from the British Army depot at Versailles. And here we begin the description of the fantasy that they continue to try to live. And it's so pathetic. It's so pathetic how they are trying to pretend that they are royalty when they are not royalty any longer. I mean, I know that he's got the title, His Royal Highness, and he's got the money. He's got more money than the king. But the reality is nobody else is still considering them this. I mean, they can't even mix and mingle with their own family. They're playing king and queen, and they have enough money to do it. But how weird and gross to insist that everybody else live in your fantasy with you. Mental illness is what it is. Here, the couple lived the life denied to them in reality. Here, Wallace was given the status denied to her by the royal family. Now, one staffer who worked for them for 40 years was taken aside when he first joined the staff, and he was given these instructions. He was told by the Duke that all staff must bow or curtsy to the Duchess and call her Your Royal Highness. You must never speak first, but wait until she has spoken to you. Never turn your back on her, but take several paces backwards and then turn to leave in her presence. I mean, quite frankly, how could this manufactured respect flatter anybody? How could the Duchess actually feel good about people doing this, knowing that they had been told to do it and that it was all a farce? All a farce for her tender ego and for the tender ego of her husband. But would this feel good that you made everybody play act with you? Would that be a comfort to you? Like, to me, I would just be like, oh, this is kind of lame. I feel stupid. The Windsors always dressed for dinner. He in a dinner jacket or a kilt, her in a long dress and jewels, and close attention was paid to the food, flowers, and guests. They brought in well-known entertainers. And once, when a member of staff was surprised that there was only 6 for dinner, Wallace quickly replied, "Yes, but they're all kings." Without any purpose in life, the Windsors' purpose became to entertain and to be entertained. If they could not live in a royal palace or be posted to an embassy, they would create the ambiance of one themselves. Their lives would become a spectacle. And the thing is, people were laughing at them. Even the people they invited to their house were laughing at them. One guest remembered them taking a party to a gala in Monte Carlo. She had on every jewel, and he wore a kilt. It was like watching a couple in a pantomime. The studied gestures, the automatic smiles. People know they're just a couple of frauds and fakes and posers, you know, and it's gross and it's funny. And I think people accepted a dinner invitation because it was a spectacle. It wasn't glamorous. It was laughable. Everywhere they went, any place, like when they went to Monte Carlo, everything had to be as though the king himself, like the king of the British Empire, had walked in. It didn't matter that he'd abdicated the throne. He had to be treated and fed and wined and dined as though he were the most elite member of the royal family. One host wrote, "The hotel got itself into a fine fizz. I gave them a delicious dinner, consommé, marrow on toast, grilled langoustine tornadoes with sauce béarnaise, and chocolate soufflé." I'm sure I mispronounced almost all of that. Poor starving France. After that, we went to the casino, and Wallace and I gambled until 5 a.m. She's very gay, and it was mostly enjoyable. The Duke sat rather dolefully at one of the smaller tables. You can't imagine the sense of luxury at LaCroix in that first summer after the war, said a French socialite in front of the Windsors. It was really a very grand villa, and to amuse us, the Duchess arranged to serve dinner in a different room each night over the 10 days that we stayed there. I mean, you know, I don't know much about the ways of the rich and famous, but, you know, what in the world kind of a lifestyle do you lead? And what sort of home do you have if there's 10 separate rooms in which you could fit your entire dining party? And it was, you know, just for fits and giggles. Let's, you know, go eat in this room, and then let's go eat in this room. It's just sort of like, okay, Why would that be so amusing? Now, of course, the Windsors also have an apartment that they stay at, a small apartment at the Ritz. And sometimes they would take, they would receive people there. But again, Duff Cooper comes in hot with his cutting words. He's just so grossed out by the Duke. He wrote, well, a dull reception at the Chamber of Commerce, followed by a call on the Windsors in a small apartment at the Ritz, wrote Duff Cooper in his diary later. Wallace was looking strikingly plain. It is sad to think that he gave up the position of King Emperor not to live on an island with the Queen of Beauty, but to share an apartment on the 3rd floor of the Ritz with this harsh-voiced, aging woman who was never even very pretty. I mean, Mr. Duff Cooper's mean. But there is some truth to what he says. I mean, the reality is, to give up all for Wallis Simpson, I think has shocked everyone for decades. In plotting the return to mainstream British life, the royal couple continued to rely heavily on the advice of Kenneth de Courcy. Now remember, he was the guy from the last chapter. He's the editor of a magazine, so I don't really know why they think he's, coming in with the hot takes on how to get life done. But he thinks that they should buy a home and then slowly but surely do things at that house, come and go at small intervals. Don't scare anybody with your presence all the time, but just come often enough, and then more and more and more, and then finally just settle there. And then, it's sort of like boiling a frog in a pot of water. Just eventually you get the job done. I mean, I think it's a fine enough plan. But the problem last chapter was that they couldn't get the home that they wanted. Remember, Fort Belvedere, his original home, had gone up for sale again. And so it had been abandoned during the war. No one was living in it, but then they were trying to lease it or sell it. When David expressed interest in it, it was snatched right off the market. They just did not want him to have an opportunity to buy that house. And of course, with David's taste in homes, there's only so many options in England. So it isn't as though there's just a plethora of places where he could make his home. And there's always the problem of the taxes. He's got that issue going on for him because, he doesn't want to pay taxes. And I can't imagine that he'd be willing to build his dream home from the ground up. Anyway, Kenneth de Courcy stayed with them in the south of France to discuss the world affairs and possible future activities. And of course, those future activities soon became clear. De Courcy saw Lord Clarendon, the Lord Chamberlain of the royal household, asking if Fort Belvedere could be made available to the Duke, as he was, quote, proposing to make some statement to the press in America, retailing all his grievances against the king and the British government. So I know you guys took the house off the market when he was interested in the last time, but I'm coming in here rip-roaring with my American ideas, and I think that what you need to do is give it to him, because if you don't, he's going to go to America and say a lot of bad things about the king. So what are you going to do about it? And Tommy Lascelles contacted Guy Liddell, who's of MI5, and it was agreed to take the risk of the Duke giving a statement to the press, which they didn't think would cut much ice. So if you want to, sure, go. Say all the things you want to say, David. We're not giving you Fort Belvedere. We're not going to let you buy it. We're not going to let you lease it. We're not going to let you stay in it. No. And I say to that, hallelujah. Because finally somebody's standing up to David. No, you can't have it. Figure out something on your own over there. But we're not going to help you. And if you want to blackmail us, take that to somebody who cares. It's not us. Now, here we come to a very interesting story, the jewelry heist. And this is very interesting. There's a lot of different sides to this potential story. And I have my ideas of how this went down. And I have to say, I'm pointing fingers straight at Miss Wallis Simpson, because my eyebrows shot right up when I heard this story. But I could be wrong. Now, in October 1946, the couple paid a short visit to the United Kingdom. The Duke, again lobbying George VI for a job. The trip was by way of the experiment to gauge the public reaction of the return to Britain. One that did not start well when it was revealed that 3 army lorries were required to transport their luggage. Now remember, this is a short visit, and yet they needed 3 army lorries to transport their luggage. I know the luggage is a big theme in this book, and maybe some of you all are tired of me hammering on about it, but I am still shocked every time. Okay, so they were led Ednam Lodge in Berkshire for a month by their friend William Ward, the 3rd Earl of Dudley, and it was there on October 16th that the Duchess was robbed of some of her jewelry, which caused a sensation and made news headlines around the world, which many were very critical of the Windsors in those articles. So not very many people felt very sorry for her for what had happened. By the way, let us not forget that the place that they're staying at William Ward's house, the Earl of Dudley, is also the husband of a woman that David had had an affair with and possibly a child. So it's all very questionable place to stay in the first place, but that's neither here nor there. I'm just reminding us of the filth and dirt with which this book is based. While the couple were in London for the evening and the staff were downstairs, a cat burglar climbed a drain pipe, crossed a flat roof, and entered through the open window of the Duchess's secretary. Wallis had rejected an offer to put her jewelry in the house safe, and instead it was simply kept under her bed. I am baffled that she would not want to secure her jewelry in a better way, especially when there was a better way offered to her. And so that to me was like red flag number one. Why would you have jewelry that is hundreds of thousands of dollars just kept under your bed? And there's all sorts of people coming in and out of the house, as you know, even just the staff. You don't know the staff at this house. Now I know that they've been vetted by the owners of the house, but you personally don't know them. So I would want to keep my jewelry in a safe. And with the amount of house guests they would have and entertainment and stuff, like just put it where you know it's going to be safe. Anyway, accounts vary, but it is said that some $250,000 worth of jewels were stolen, though some items were later found abandoned on a local golf course, including a string of pearls valued then at £5,000 and gifted to the Duke by Queen Alexandra. See, what in the world? Why would somebody leave that on a golf course? So that's red flag number two for me. If somebody's going to steal the jewelry, why would they leave any of it anywhere, especially expensive pieces? It's not like they grabbed a bunch of jewelry and like, ooh, but I accidentally picked up some costume jewelry. You know, there wouldn't have been costume jewelry in the mix. Anyway, the whole episode was distressing for everyone. The Countess of Dudley later wrote that Wallis showed an unpleasant and, to me, unexpected side of her character. She wanted all the servants put through a kind of third degree, but I would have none of this. All of them, except for one kitchen maid being old and devoted staff of long standing. The Duke was both demented with worry and near to tears. I think it should be noted, by the way, that to make up for the loss, he supposedly bought new jewels worth $75,000 because he knew that she was so upset about the jewelry that was stolen. I don't know about that. Now, the robbery received wide publicity and did not endear the Windsors to a Britain living with rationing. When asked what jewelry she had been wearing that night, Wallis replied, as if perfectly obvious, "A fool would know that with tweeds or other daytime clothes one wears gold, and that with evening clothes one wears platinum." Don't you know that? I mean, she's so desperate to appear well-bred, but she's just like a pig in earrings. I mean, who would say something like that? A fool knows that you would wear gold with daytime clothes or tweed. I thought everyone knew that. Well, nobody who's not trying to pretend like they know. Mysteries remained about the burglary, raising suspicions of an inside job. Now, possibly, and there were some rumors, and you can only imagine where these rumors began. Some rumors said that the royal family had sponsored the heist because they were keen to recover gifts made to the Duke. Who do you think came up with that lie? Does that not sound to you? Does that not have the ring of as if Meghan and Harry had come up with a lie for them to say, "Hey, you know, I think did it. I think it was probably the royal family." Because why would the royal family stoop so low as to steal the jewels back? You know, I mean, I that's low for anybody, but I think certainly for these, you know, elite members of the royal family who have carried themselves with a lot of decency thus far in all of it, I don't think that they would stoop so low as to hire some lame little cat burglar who was then going to leave half the jewels out on a golf course. I think we can all put that idea to bed. Anyway, none of the Dudleys' guard dogs had barked, and a detective at the front door had heard nothing. In 2003, the Scotland Yard case files were released, naming a well-known local burglar called Leslie Holmes. Now, the official historian of the Queen's Jewels, Leslie Field, later claimed, "I believe the Duchess of Windsor defrauded the insurers by overstating the number and identifications of the jewels, which had been disposed of. At least 30 items she named as being stolen turned up in the Sotheby catalogue in Geneva in April 1987, and they were sold for high prices. She clearly could never wear those jewels again after she and her husband had collected the insurance. They had from the beginning been in a strong box in Paris and remained there." So, did they set up the robbery? I don't understand how in the world any of this happened. So you die, and then suddenly the jewels were in your possession all along? Like, when did you recover those? You know, how'd that happen? It just smacks of like the lamest setup. And then, of course, you know, they said that the Duke bought all this extra jewelry to make up for the loss, but he had to buy extra jewelry for her because now she couldn't wear the pieces she claimed had been stolen. But I think it was fraudulent. I think that they did this for more money. I think that they did this as a genius way of continuing to line their own pockets. They don't have any morals. They don't have any code by which that they would live. You know, so none of that story rings true to me as an actual crime against them. To me, in my mind, those two had come up with a little scheme, and then they were going to try to blame the poor kitchen maid. I mean, it's so gross, but I can so see it. Or blame the royal family. We think it's just a theory, but we've got an idea that my brother had something to do with it. Who does that sound like? Okay. The rest of this chapter just continues to talk about those documents, but it actually isn't any new information in any context whatsoever, except for the fact that, and it's only about 1.5 pages. Now, you'll recall that the Americans promised that they would not let that file be leaked about the Duke that had been found amongst the German documents. But in November 1946, Newsweek leaked the story of the Marburg file to the irritation of Lord Inverchapel, the British ambassador in Washington. He wrote, "I am at a loss to know what explanation I can give to the Foreign Office with regard to this leakage in the view of the special precautions which your department agreed to undertake." And this is truly egregious considering the promise that the Americans made to the British, saying, if you will allow us to keep this file, because we believe it's important for the historic record, we will make sure it's under lock and key and that nobody ever finds out about it. And then for it to be in Newsweek, it's like, oh, you know, that's very unfortunate. And so the rest of the chapter is just the usual players wringing their hands saying, oh no, oh no. But there's no conclusion. There's nothing that's of very much weight and worth in that chapter. So suffice it to say, the documents have been leaked. The story of the German documents is not over yet. And that the Americans did not hold up their end of the bargain there. That is the end of that. I want to wish you all a very, very Merry Christmas. I hope you have one of the best. And I am excited to bring you some more Brittany this week. I'm off from teaching this week. And so I get to spend a little bit more time doing the thing I love, which is this channel. So anyway, a little bit more Brittany this week. I would love, in my fantasy world, I imagine being able to finish up that book this week. Again, I do tend to live in a fantasy world when it comes to being really regular with this channel. But I would love to finish up this book this week because I really, really, really want to start the Matthew Perry book in the new year. I know Matthew Perry died, and he died under some sad, really sad circumstances, but he had really been working to change his life and to face the demons that he had and to look head on into the things that are hard and to, you know, be honest with himself. And I think that for the new year, that would actually be a really great book because I know all of us are probably making New Year's resolutions and a lot of us have goals, changes that we want to make in the new year. And I thought it would be a great companion book for our New Year's resolutions and just for looking honestly at the things we want to change and just being honest people about what needs to be done. And so I thought it'd be kind of a good New Year's book. Anyway, I'll see you guys later. And again, very, very, very Merry Christmas. Bye.